Washington landed 2 commits on Sunday, and there are plenty more on the way.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this whatever watch or listen of the day it is for you, as we are coming to you in a special Sunday afternoon edition. Even though, I'm hanging out on the East Coast. It's nighttime here. Lars still hanging out back in Seattle, where it is a wonderful afternoon. I'm sure of it. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Lars, as we're recording this, Washington has landed 2 commitments on Sunday. Looks like there are plenty more on the way from, some of the wonderful recruiting stuff that we love, that are head coach cryptic tweets, but we're not going to get into those right now. We're going to talk about the 2 commits. We got Victor Sanchez Hernandez, a 3-star edge rusher, defensive lineman from Kamiak High School in Washington, and 3-star wide receiver, Dezmen Roebuck. Where do you want to start here?
Let's go inside out. Let's start with the in-state and work our way out, because this one intrigued me, where Victor Sanchez Hernandez came to Washington's camp, had some interest. I talked to him this afternoon, which will be a story coming up on Athlon Sports later on today. But he mentioned that he had come up in spring for an unofficial, just to meet with the coaches, really just to get his name out there. Because one thing that struck me is Washington does like recruiting the state, but depending on how far down you go down the list, it tends to get a little interesting. But to me, what really struck me is the coaches seem to like his projectability, which kind of the main buzzword we've heard from this coaching staff. But then you turn on the tape and you can see it, where he also has a background in Taekwondo. Devin Hyde is a rugby player. You're starting to see Jason Kafusi look at some of these unique 2-sport athletes, not just a basketball and track guy, not just a football and baseball guy. These are 2 perfect sports for defensive linemen / edge rushers to play, which to me, now that Victor Sanchez Hernandez is going to be transferring to Kamiak this fall, I'm really intrigued to see how he can take and develop as a player on the field, because it's not necessarily a take where, this is a guy who I can say is going to have, 10, 12 sacks, in 2-3 years from now. Not necessarily, but all the potential is there. And that's one thing that Jason Kavusi laid out for Hernandez was they like the potential. They like where you're at as an in-state guy, potentially one of, which we'll talk about later, a number of other players that could stay in state. It really does give a good defensive crop for the staff to build around long-term, a projectable body at 6'6", 6'5", around 250.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Braylon Trice, but when I hear what struck me is the motor. That's one thing, the work ethic. That's what I want to hit on. That to me is what really strikes me is, okay, this take is intriguing, but I'm willing to buy it because of the long-term projectability with it.
So I certainly agree with you. The reason I started shaking my head when you said Braylon Trice is because positionally, I don't think he's going to stick at edge. I think that, and Brandon Huffman did a really good job of pointing this out as well in his 247 Sports article, was that he is probably going to end up playing 3-tech at some point during his college career, because he's really, really big. And that's one of the nice things is he's got a really projectable body, as you said, and he's got the ability, that motor, to come play down inside. Another guy we're going to talk about later, who I just absolutely love, is Dominic Macon. And I feel like those 2 guys, and if you end up taking those 2 guys and, you call them your 2 defensive tackles, even though Sanchez Hernandez is still listed as an edge, I'd be happy with that. Just with the state of defensive line recruiting, just up and down the West Coast over all of this, I would be really happy with that, because I think there's a lot of promise there. And it's not something where, you look at some of the schools around the country and just say, oh yeah, this is going to pay off for them day one with these kinds of defensive tackles. No, this is going to be a really, really just wait and see approach. Going to take a couple of years to probably even see them hit the field for the first time, just in terms of where their bodies are now and where they need to be. And Victor Sanchez Hernandez is like the key, because the number one thing is just I think the key example of that, because the number one thing when I watch his film is I still see he's very stiff with some things, and it's very clear that, and this isn't a bad thing. that he's still very raw with the game of football, where he didn't start playing until high school, which is okay. And these are things that are all fine, but he still has so much that he needs to learn, whether it be on the edge or be on the interior, that the take is fine. The take is good, but it's just, you're not going to see the fruits of the labor pay off here for 2 years minimum, I would say. And I feel like you can say the same thing about Dezmen Roebuck, 3-star receiver from Arizona.
You absolutely can. But the one thing that Roebuck does have that I know we talked about this before the show, production. And at receiver, yes, that's one thing for me where, okay, you're 5'11", 6 foot, generously 6 foot, but you were able to produce 2 1,000-yard seasons at a 5A high school. This isn't a 2A, 1A guy that's a big fish in a small pond. This is in Arizona. I think this is something we mentioned on a previous show. The state of Arizona really is underrated when it comes to recruiting. Just in general.
Yeah.
We talk about California, we talk about Texas, we talk about the South, all that. Great. All those spots are great. But Arizona is a really fertile ground, and we've seen Jed Fisch capitalize on that in Arizona. And I think this is, in a way, a product of that, where Roebuck had some interest in Arizona, had an offer from Arizona under Jedd Fisch and Kevin Cummings last year, came in for an official in September with their home opener. And I think, to me, that was a guy that Kevin Cummings said, okay, this is a guy where I like the doubt, in a way, almost kind of like Kevin Green, where we haven't seen Kevin Green on the field.
Okay, yeah.
But that type of receiver, that body of receiver, where you still want to have guys on the outside, but we know how much Jedd Fisch loves mesh, and we know how much Jedd Fisch loves those slot receivers over the middle. So you do have to have those guys, and getting a guy with 13-8 or 22 touchdowns over 2 seasons. I did do some quick math there. And back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. That, to me, like, will he play as a freshman or redshirt freshman? Maybe not. Probably not. But having that production, to me, says, okay, this guy has high football IQ, can come in and learn the offense, can be a serviceable body, be a good depth piece. And so in a couple of years, when you get into spring 2026, this is a guy where he's sat behind Denzel Boston and some of these other guys for a couple of years. And now this is his turn. And I think that is kind of how I'm reading the situation, because when you look at the other receivers that they have on the board, it does look a little intriguing, interesting, but
there's some very different body types from where he is. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Exactly. And so that's why I think this is a specific body type take, and the production for me says, okay, I'm willing to give Kevin Cummings the benefit of the doubt.
So I like where you're going with this, because the one thing where he said that when he was talking to Blair Angulo of 247 Sports, one of the things that he said was they laid out their plan for me, and it looked very similar to they showed me a lot of film with Dorian Singer during their time at Arizona. And that's really interesting, where Dorian Singer, in a very similar light, didn't necessarily have breakaway speed, but he turned into a fantastic route runner during his time under Kevin Cummings. And they used him on the inside. They used him on the outside. They used him all over the formation and had him do a lot of different things, which is really interesting. And I feel that you could say the same thing about, as you said, Kevin Green, Jason Robinson on the same light, Giles Jackson, Keith Reynolds, where they have a lot of those guys. And it's kind of becoming a thing where, there are a lot of bigger receivers coming in on the outside, but there's still certainly a place for these smaller, quicker guys that are technicians that do things a little bit differently than a Denzel Boston or a Jeremiah Hunter or a Roman Dunze might. And it's just, there's a place for both, especially in Jedd Fisch's offense, as we've seen during his time at Arizona. So I agree. And the two things that I really noticed are, for somebody who is listed at 5'10", 170, he high points the ball and tracks it really, really well. And I really enjoyed seeing that part of his game. And he just, everything when it comes to his eyes and his hands, he is a really complete player in that sense. And if he can, I think that this take could end up being one that you look back on in a couple of years and just say, that was a really, really underrated guy. And it probably a lot has to do with his size. If he can add strength and take hits well, then this could end up being a really promising player. And Lars, that being said, how many more of these guys are on the way over the coming days and weeks? And we'll get that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, because I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And, I got to say it because I'm going to be at the game on Monday I gotta say, just take Red Sox money line over the Toronto Blue Jays, whatever it might be by the time the game ends up starting. I love Tanner Houck. He's probably gonna be one of the Cy Young favorites. The guy I put some money on FanDuel, and since I'm in Massachusetts, I might be doing that as well. So Lars, we gotta take 5 seconds here and talk about cryptic tweets. Because if we add up all the umbrellas that Jedd Fisch has tweeted out while I was at a wedding on Saturday night and into Sunday now, we're up to 11. If we're counting the 2 commits that we just talked about, that's 2. You and I were doing some math. We're throwing some names out, and we said we have to stop this. We're going to start throwing out these names on the show because we know some of these names already have crystal ball predictions to Washington. Some of them might not. We're going to write about some of those guys over on our respective websites as well. So which guy do you want to start with? I think it has to be the biggest name personally. I know I just gave you this. I just asked, but we have to talk about Zaydrius Rainey-Sale because when we look at all the guys who were on campus over the weekend, that's the one everybody wants to know about, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was the guy that Washington, like several other recruits that we talked about coming in this weekend, intentionally scheduled this visit to give Washington the last shot. Sometimes that works in the sense of, okay, I already kind of know where I'm going. I'm willing to give the school the last shot, kind of just see what they have to offer. Or the flip side of that, which I think is the case of DRS, I went across the country to Florida State. I went down to UCLA. Now I already announced his commitment date for July 1st before his visit to Washington, which already kind of gave you a clue as to say, I already know what Washington is. I'm pretty good with it, but I can't wait to get back there. And that, I think, was the important thing. And he posted a live video driving around the golf cart with I believe it was Darian Clemens. I could be wrong. I couldn't necessarily make out who was the other recruit on that golf cart with him, but he just looked at home. And I think pretty symbolic of what the case was. Then I will respect the conversation that I had. And I will just say I would not be surprised if Washington does very well in the state of Washington with the guys, with respect to the guys that they brought in for official visits. I talked to Zaydrius back in mid-April, March, April, somewhere around then. And he already had a really good relationship with Robert Bala and Jed Fish, really liked the vibe that was over there. And I think if anything this weekend, the vibes were high. The vibes were definitely high. Very high. So if there was ever a weekend, which we did talk about before the show, they might have miscalculated some of these visits. But this weekend, they did pretty well. They did pretty well, all things considered. And so I would not be surprised if Zaydrius does end up staying home again. We will wait for his official win on July 1st, but that would not be surprising for me at this point.
No, that's what I'm going to be watching very closely. There are a couple other ones that, have crystal ball predictions from UW in the past or got new ones this weekend. 4-star, he's listed as an athlete. I think he's going to play linebacker. Our good buddy Ben Glassmeyer wrote a fantastic breakdown of this film over on Huskies Wire on Jonathan Epperson. That's a guy I really like watching. I think that he could be a lot of fun in a Steve Belichick defense. But one that I'm really, really intrigued by is 4-star tight end Baron Nwane, where this is a guy who's also picked up some UW crystal balls over the past 24, 36 hours, whatever it is you want to call it. And I like his film a lot. I think that Washington wants to take two tight ends, and it seems like I'm going to put in this prediction now. It's going to be Baron Nwane and Vander Plug. I know, to a lot of the everydayers, a lot of the people out there who follow recruiting, that might not be super bold, but I just want to put it out there right now that that's what I think this tight ends class is going to look like. And for Jordan Paopao, I think that's a fantastic class for him.
2 perfect body types, 2 6'5", 6'6" tight ends. Baron Nwane, good pass catcher, I think might be a slightly better blocker.
A better pass catcher too. I love Baron Nwane's film as a pass catcher. Yeah.
I was going to say, again, as we always say, no disrespect intended to the kids, right? Because you're talking about 2 4-stars here, but it's a good dynamic to have where you have a pass catcher and a, for lack of a better term, K-Dot and blocker, but still very serviceable pass. That's why I want to throw Kate in there because very serviceable as a pass catcher, but probably more advanced as a blocker than Vander Plug. But that's why you take both. You don't necessarily go and say, hey, this is the star guy we want. And by the way, you took a shot at Caleb Edwards. Might have come second or third, but that's exactly what Jordan Paopao needed. Get a couple of 4-star tight ends, especially when you look at what the class was coming in this past season with Charlie Kroll, Kaliki Latu in the transfer portal. I'm missing one other one, I swear. But just looking at that room, you needed to kind of really ramp it back up. You get Decker DeGraff coming in as a true freshman as well. But really, you wanted to carry on that tradition. I think Jordan Paopao, that's one thing he's done at Washington. but back when he was under Steve Sarkisian, Chris Peterson, and now Jedd Fisch, he knows how to identify the position. He's a former offensive lineman, just knows how to do it. And I think Jedd's offense really has allowed him as a coach and find those multiplicity of tight ends where, hey, I can have a pass catcher and a blocker, and we might not run 2 tight end sets a lot, but I'd rather have all those body types on the roster. So whatever part of the field we're in, we can use to our advantage.
No, absolutely. That's the thing with when I look at somebody like Vander Ploeg, especially, he with his body type right now being 6'6", 220, he just looks a lot like a big receiver. They split him out a lot in high school and everything. So that's somebody where I really like watching him, but I want to make sure we hit as many of these names as possible. I said I'm going to talk about Dominic Macon because I've kind of, just established an agenda here. And as all the Everdares know, I love my agendas here on this show. And this is a guy where Andrew Nemec, a couple of other people put in predictions for him to commit to Washington. And I would love to see that for many different standpoints. The main one being, I think that this dude could end up being one of the steals of this class. I know I said that about Elijah Vicona the other day. I still stand by that. We'll see what happens with USC there as well. But with Dominic Macon, I think this is somebody that Washington did a really great job of identifying, offering, and wrapping up quickly. Where that's exactly what, a school like UW can do with some of these under the radar 3-star guys. And you can't build your whole class like that. That's just not going to get it done. That's not going to get you to New Year's Six games. That's not going to win you a national championship. But when you stack those guys and then you add in a Vander Ploeg, I'm going to get to Chris Lawson as well. When you add in those kinds of players as well, along with Dominic Macons of the world, that's a really solid recruiting class. And I love this film. I love the way he plays. I'm not going to go into that for, probably what feels like the 4th straight podcast at this point. But one guy who I know you want to talk about as well, that you have an agenda for, that I absolutely agree with, is another guy who's, really gaining some traction. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up picking Washington. And that's offensive lineman Darius Afalava.
Yeah, the agenda full force on this one. If there is an offensive line equivalent to Dominic Macon, it's Darius Afalava. And this one goes all the way back to, again, I know we don't like talking about it, but it does go back to the relationship that Brendan Carroll developed with him at Arizona. But really, this also is a player that it's in a way, this is a not positional take. When Jalen McMillan committed to Washington, when he got his offer from Washington way back in 2009, way back as a sophomore, he just seemed like a guy who was a perfect fit for the University of Washington for whatever reason. I can't really quantify it, but he came into this weekend very, very high on Washington. Let me just put it that way. In the conversation that I had with him, taking some other official visits, but Washington was again one where he's probably going to play guard for Washington, which I don't hate. Could kick out the tackle at the end of the day. But I do think, especially with Chamtalele being a 4-star, I could see Darius working his way up to a 4-star eventually with a strong senior season. But even if he's a high 3-star, this isn't exactly kind of guy where we saw, Jonah Morgan and some other guy, Jonas Savannah at Arizona be 3-stars, and how that turned out. So I'm not worried in the slightest in that regard with the offensive line, because Darius, if Darius doesn't end up as a Husky, I will be floored personally, but to me, it's exactly the type of physical guy that you need to take in the trenches. And that's not to say that Jake Flores or Chantalele aren't physical, but out that group and going, because you're still taking probably 2 or 3 more offensive linemen in this class, but really setting yourself up for the fall to where, okay, maybe we missed on some other targets, but this is a solid trio to build around along the trenches for Brendan Carroll moving forward.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And just speaking of building positions, there's still a couple groups that defensively, one that we haven't talked about yet, and that's just the secondary. And another guy who's starting to get those UW crystal balls is 3-star cornerback Larue Zamorano. And this is a guy I really, really like the more I watch his film. He's somebody who's long. He's listed at 6'2", 175. And I love his eyes. I love his physicality. I love the way he tackles, because he's not one of those defenders where, he knows that he's bigger and stronger and faster than the majority of the players that he's out there on the field with. This is somebody who is a really, really solid form tackler. And, for somebody who's 15, 16, 17 years old in high school, a lot of those kids want to go out there and make the highlight plays, but he knows that he doesn't have to do that, and that he's playing for something more, and that he's playing at the next level. He's got a nice offer list, and it would be a really nice win for Washington to secure him. And this is another guy when, you and I have talked a lot about all coaches have a type. John Richardson has probably the most fun type when it comes to what he wants in his secondary. And, as I said, 6'2", 175, Zamorano fits that really, really well. And I think you add some extra weight to his frame. He's got really nice eyes, like I said, and you just add that with everything that he already is as a cornerback. And you've got somebody who would be a really, really nice player and just in this defense as well, whether it be with Steve Belichick, whoever it is back there moving forward, as you and I talked about, if Steve Belichick makes his way back to the NFL at some point soon, we're not going to be surprised by that. Let's be honest. But Lars, with that being said, is this momentum that Jedd Fisch was looking for on the recruiting trail? And we'll get that right after message from our good friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, Lars, let's start this on the negative side, and we'll move into the positive side. We've seen some predictions. We've seen some key UW targets land in other places, whether it be Andrew Marsh getting a crystal ball to Michigan, Douglas Uchu getting one to Tennessee. They're Dijon Lee to Alabama. Not that one is surprising, but there have been some swings and some misses, especially for that May 31st weekend. We didn't ever assume that they were going to get everybody, but when we spent a lot of time talking about top 15, top 20 recruiting class, those were the kinds of guys that you really wanted to get in the boat. Chris Lawson was another one where, June 21st commitment date has pushed it back to July 7th. Looks like things might be going in Washington's favor with, Brandon Huffman putting in a crystal ball that he's going to end up picking UW. And that's one I want to wait and see, but that would be a really nice addition to the class. And the more guys you can get like that, obviously the better. With that being said, even though these aren't the highest rated guys that committed to UW, as we're recording this on Sunday and the Everydayers are hopefully listening to this on Sunday or Monday, this is exactly what Washington needed. Where getting 14 guys on campus and Jedd Fisch is, cryptically saying, hey, there are 11 guys coming. I know our buddy Scott Eklund said there are 11 or 12 commits coming as well. So if that all ends up coming to fruition, this is exactly what Jedd Fisch was looking for, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, again, with the preface that you're not going to win every recruiting battle, especially early on. But I do think also you got to give a credit to Jedd Fisch. They took a big swing. They took a couple big swings in those first, the spring game visit and then the May 31st weekend, getting a bunch of 4-stars, right? Smith and Roebuck, 3-star Chase Sims, other guys. But then those guys continue to take official visits elsewhere. I've kept in touch with the parents, and it just seemed like, okay, some of these guys, maybe the door is closed now, maybe it doesn't close permanently. And I think the one thing that we also did talk about was this is going to be a big class. Even with only 14 or 15 right now, this class isn't closed. A class of 15 is not big. So I think in a way, there's going to be a lot of flips. There's going to be a lot of flips between October and December, however you want to quantify it, once games actually get starting to play. And some of these kids that may be committed elsewhere, their school starts off 2-2 and Washington's 4-0. And now we're in the Big Ten in Washington, 5-1, 6-2, whatever you want to call it. Some of these kids that thought, okay, I like the staff, but I didn't know how quickly they could win, almost like the Kalen DeBoer staff, where, oh, wow, these guys are winning pretty quick. Maybe I should actually consider them. That's why getting those early summer or spring visits was important, because you can bring them up for a quick, unofficial, game day official in the fall and do a late flip in that regard. But I think, to me, you have to get somebody somewhere, and none of the bodies that are on the way or have already committed are bad. Let's be very clear about that. There's nobody where it's, oh, this is a criminal take. This is you didn't want to try. This isn't a I'm going to not throw any former coaches under the bus, but just basically offering kids for the sake of taking them and knowing they would never pan out of Washington. I don't think that's the case with any of these guys. And it is kind of a slow build because we're seeing 3-star. But then, as we talked about, you have 4-star Zaydrius Rainey-Sale, 4-star Jonathan Epperson, 4-star Chris Lawson, 4-star Baron White. The 4 stars are coming, people. That's what I'm trying to say here. The 4 stars are coming, and I think this is a good foundation to build the class on going into the fall. And then you can work out who you want to flip, what you want to do in the portal, which guys might, transfer out after the end of the season that open up some more spots, which we won't be able to know for several months. So this is a good foundation to build off of. I think could it be better? Without question. But I don't think it's necessarily damning where they're at right now, knowing that this class is going to go nothing but up.
So I couldn't agree with you more there. And it's just nice to see them taking those steps in the right direction, where it got off to a really slow start. And as you said, there's a big game being talked, right? With a lot of these things, it was, oh yeah, we want top 15, we want top 20. This is what we're striving for. And that's great. We like that. We talked about that endlessly on the show because setting those expectations for yourself is a great thing. But especially just coming off being the national championship, coming off, what everything was last season, it's very hard to just get off to that slow start. And things could certainly turn around. And as you said, you just named a whole bunch of guys where if all those guys do end up choosing Washington over the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden this looks way better than, it did 2 weeks ago. And it's just a matter of getting to that point and getting some of these guys just saying, okay, getting more guys in the boat, just saying, okay, it's moving. And yeah, people are going to look at the class rank right now and see 58 nationally. That doesn't look great, especially with everything that was talked about. But we're going to look back on this class on, let's call it July 15th. And it's going to look vastly different than it does now. And people are probably going to feel a lot better about it. Just from everything you and I know, from everything that sounds like is going on, just it's going to look better. And we're probably going to look back at this weekend where we could have looked back at May 31st. And I know we said similar things about that where, if we got really bold and just said, if it looks a certain way on June, whatever, like we're going to look back at this and say it happened. But now we're looking back on that May 31st weekend and saying, oof, it's rough that, Phillip Bell is probably going elsewhere. It's rough that Dijon Lee is going elsewhere. And a lot of these other guys from those visits just aren't coming to UW. But we can look at this June 21st weekend and say, oh yeah, if you get Zaydrius Rainey-Sale, that's a really, really nice headliner for your class, man. It would have been a really great headliner for Kalen DeBoer, but losing him and then, potentially getting him back again, I feel like that's almost more impressive than Kalen DeBoer just saying, hey, we went to the national championship. You want to come to Washington? And as great as that was, I think that this would be more impressive.
Yeah, in a way, it's a more impressive win because it's after that first visit. It's after that first commitment. It's after the last staff left where there's all the cards are on the table for ZRS to say, you know what? I like Fish, but I would rather just try my luck out of saying, if so be it, I need to transfer back. Cool. That's a big statement if Jedd Fisch is able to again, got to caveat with if, right? Got to caveat it. But if Jedd Fisch is able to reel him back in, that also then bodes well down the line when you start looking at the 26 and 27 class in state. And Logan Coleman-Brewster, we're another guy where his younger brother is in the 26 class, a touted edge rusher. So yeah, these are all guys where you're not taking one for the other. You're not taking Victor Sanchez Hernandez because you're getting Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. That's not how it's working. But you're playing kind of all of them together in that same realm, saying, hey, you know what? These guys could work together. These guys could work together. You're not going to offer all top 12 guys in the state and take all 12. As much as some fans might like that, that's just not reality. But getting the right guys in the system is key. And getting the big fish in that big pond, and especially also beating Florida State, which that was, twice now Florida State tried to come into the state of Washington for a 4-star defensive recruit and missed. Savell Smalls was the last one. Obviously, Washington fans hope ZRS is going to be better than what Smalls turned out to be. But it's a Jedd Fisch had to have, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the show where we put the over. I put the over under 7.5, 8, 8.5?
Yeah, 7.5.
And cleared that on day one. That was nice.
Yeah.
So for me, it's there's a lot of promise. Again, it's also the first class, and everything about recruiting is instant, right? Hey, what's Jedd Fisch doing right now? Well, he's only 5-6 months on the job. judge him in 18 months when those 20, he's already got some guys in the 26 class, a 4-star in the 26 class Oregon, the running back. So you talk about all those guys that are now going to see Washington develop over the next 18 to 12 months. Those guys could then say, hey, you know what? Maybe I should have had more interest than I initially did and let me join in next year. And that's how you start stacking these classes because and Jed, I think, knew this wouldn't be the world's greatest class at Washington, but he wanted to set the bar high knowing, okay, this is now where we're at. Now we just got to keep climbing. And that is all you can ask for as a head coach.
Lars, that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the Everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support, especially, with a fun Sunday episode drop for you. With that being said, we're going to be coming to you again next time on Wednesdays. I'm still out of town, obviously. But we're going to be coming to you next on Wednesday. We're going to try to get you as much as we can of the breaking news that should be coming up over the next couple of days. So make sure you stay tuned. And the best way to make sure you're updated on everything that's going on is to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. Updating the channel 3 times a week with new content. And whenever there's bonus episodes, we're doing little things like that here and there where we can. So make sure you subscribe. Click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Like the video. Leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.